Morning, everybody. Happy dry July. I'm coming at you 2 times a week this month to talk all things quitting drinking and then answer any questions that you have afterwards. And today I'm talking about anxiety and depression. This was probably the most requested topic when I pulled in my stories about what you want me to talk about. So I know that a lot of people drink to cope with mental health. So I wanted to talk about that for a moment. So welcome everybody. Happy dry July. So the thing with anxiety and depression, although it feels like alcohol is helpful for these situations and it makes your symptoms go away and it's your best friend and it's the only thing that helps, it's actually causing a lot of your misery the next day, which then prompts you to drink about it again. And for some people like me, I actually developed alcohol-induced anxiety, which wasn't a thing for me. Like, I don't have anxiety. So I actually developed anxiety because of all the alcohol that I was drinking. So that's how powerful the changes are that alcohol makes to the brain. It's not just that you stay yourself and you drink and drink and drink and you'll deal with it later. It's the more you drink, the more opportunity you give alcohol to change your brain. So then it reinforces drinking more. So what happens, I want you to visualize like a graph or something. I wish I had a whiteboard. But over time, you start with some like baseline level of anxiety and depression. And the more you drink to cope with it, your baseline gets lower and lower and lower and lower over time. So say you start here with anxiety and you drink to make your anxiety go away. So it goes down. And then when the alcohol wears off, you actually get extra anxiety. And then you settle back down a little bit higher than you did before. And then you drink to deal with that again. And you don't get the same relief as you did before. And then you get extra anxiety even higher. So over time, our baseline changes. And then you need more alcohol to cope with the additional anxiety and depression. So if you're experiencing that, especially with anxiety, it can be really hard to stop drinking because one of the common symptoms of alcohol withdrawal is increased anxiety. So you're drinking to manage something, and then when you take a break, it gets 1,000 times worse and you feel like you can't deal with it. So if you're in that kind of situation, then it's really important to go to therapy or to talk to your doctor if you need help with the anxiety in early withdrawal. I think that even though drinking, it feels like it helps the situation, we're not actually learning any tools to deal with anything. We're just drinking at things and putting the pause button on them for a moment, and then they come back later and we still don't know how to deal with it. So we drink about it again, and then the cycle repeats and repeats. And on the other side, if you struggle with depression, which is what I struggle with, when you drink, alcohol will boost your mood. So it boosts your mood, it makes you feel happy and excited, or if you have anxiety, it makes you feel relaxed and it reduces your stress levels. And what happens as the alcohol wears off with depression, your mood will actually crash, and that's why you see a lot of, like, the stereotype is with like drunk girls at the bar. You'll see drunk girls at the end of the night crying when they're drunk, and that's because their serotonin has dropped so low below baseline that now they're like spontaneously in tears because their mood is so impacted by all the alcohol that they were drinking. And if you repeat this process for years and years and years, your depression is going to start getting worse. Remember, I said if you start here and you drink and your mood goes up and then it crashes and then you settle back down, you drink, your mood goes up, it crashes, you settle, and you repeat it, your baseline is decreasing the whole time until your baseline mood is so low that it just sucks to not drink. And this is why a lot of people can struggle with suicidal thoughts when they stop drinking, or at the end of their drinking, which is why I had to stop, because your depression gets so severe, and then that mood crash as the alcohol is wearing off brings you down so much lower that you just start to have really bad thoughts. So I've talked about all of this. If you want to know more about like how these changes occur in the brain and like what's actually going on, I've talked about this in my podcast, and I can reference those episodes in the caption when I post this live later. But if there are any questions on anything anxiety or depression related or dry July related, please put them in the question bubble. There should be like a talk bubble with a question mark in it. If you click on that, you can add a question. Can we all just appreciate the tiny microphone for a moment? Like, how amazing is this microphone? I feel like I can sit wherever I want and you can hear me and I don't have to yell because my voice is so small. So that is great. And for me personally, while I wait for any questions to come in, when I used to be up in the middle of the night, every single night that I like got really drunk with really, really, really bad anxiety, and I felt really restless, and like the room was zooming out. I felt super weird, and I couldn't calm down, and I couldn't go to sleep, and my heart was all jacked up. And because I don't actually have anxiety normally without the alcohol, that anxiety went away pretty quickly. But if you do have anxiety, it may get worse before it gets better, which is why I said talk to a therapist, talk to your doctor, and get some support. I do struggle really bad with depression. So what I observed with that when I quit drinking is it didn't get worse. And I didn't go down to that dark place that I used to go to all the time when I would get really drunk. And then over time, as I kept this little promise to myself that every day I wasn't going to drink, my self-esteem started to rebuild. I felt like I could trust myself again. And my depression and self-loathing began to improve. So I'm 3.5 years sober, and I do have depression. I've had it my whole life. It doesn't just magically disappear because I quit drinking. It's something that I actively have to work on every day. But the good thing is now I'm not doing things that make my depression worse. Now I can actually learn like what helps my depression, and I can focus on lifestyle factors that will improve my mood. And I've been able to see how different things, like different foods that I eat or playing with my wake up time, how that impacts my mood. But when I was drinking every day, I felt like crap all the time. So I couldn't see how like changing little lifestyle factors had an impact because I always felt like trash. So it is still a struggle for me, but it's something that I can actually work on now, which is positive. So thank you guys for submitting questions. Can you talk about your first 90 days sober? So I actually did a video on this. I'll share it in my stories after if you want the whole story. But I did 90 days 2 different times. I challenged myself to do 90 days sober, and it was because I was so low from all the drinking. Like I was a daily drinker, and I would get pretty drunk, probably like 4 nights a week on average, like very drunk. And being that drunk causes the 3 a.m. anxiety and really bad depression afterwards and bad sleep. I was sleeping like 4 hours a night, and I would force myself to stay awake from like 3 a.m. to 6 or 7 a.m. And this was back before quarantine when I had to be like at the 9 to 5. So it was horrible. And I would lie awake thinking about like what a loser I am, how I'm the worst person in the world. Why do you always do this? Why are you so weak? And then some really scary thoughts would start coming into my head from the depression and the adaptation that I was discussing like 10 minutes ago. And those thoughts were getting so scary that I realized I might do something about it. And I decided, like, I'm not going to drink for 90 days. I told my husband, because he used to always sit with me while I did this, like, middle of the night awake thing that I did. And he would always sit with me and try to comfort me and not sleep either. So I told him, we were watching the sun come up, and I said, I can't drink for 90 days. And I picked 90 over 30 because I just felt like 90 had a bigger impact. And I thought it would be a reset. I thought that my tolerance was just too high. And it was pretty high. But I thought I just needed a reset. I had a bad habit. Like all these things you've probably told yourself too. But I just quit drinking and didn't do anything else because I had no interest in sobriety. My only goal was to moderate, so I didn't need to do anything. And I wasn't like other people. I didn't need support. That's what I told myself. So I just literally did nothing except not drink. And I was very cranky. I was very, very cranky. I flipped out. If you listen to my podcast, you've probably heard me tell the sunglasses story a couple times. If you haven't, you got to go listen to my podcast. But I would flip out over the tiniest things. And I was always cranky and in a bad mood. I was triggered easily. I was easily offended. I was trying to talk myself back into why I didn't have to do the 90 days. But I did complete it. And I did drink again. And it was a bad time. Don't recommend. But I have another live where I discussed what that was like. And what I saw is that all of the bad stuff came back. There was a couple month delay where I just drank a little bit. So I went from drinking every day to only having 2 glasses of wine on Saturday night and stopping because I wanted to, which like I had never been able to do even when I first started drinking. So I thought I was cured. But over time, I relaxed back into my normal drinking. And I saw the middle of the night anxiety come right back. The scary thoughts come back. I was keeping myself up all night. I hated myself. I hated my guts so badly. I felt like I was a prisoner in like someone that I just could not stand. And then the exact same situation, like sitting with my husband up all night, really scary thoughts. I realized like this is just the way that you drink. And it will never change, even if you take 10 years off. So I looked at my husband and I was like, I can never drink ever again. And then those 90 days were different. The second time I quit, this time, I was more open to sobriety. I started listening to podcasts, which is why, like when I had more sober time, I decided to make a podcast because that's what helped me the most in the beginning. I went to therapy and I worked on like, why was I drinking? I told myself I was just like a social drinker. I like to drink for fun, but my favorite drinking was by myself. So texting people is not the same as like social drinking. So when I got support the second time around, it was so different. I didn't have that crankiness anymore. My emotions were still kind of all over the place, which is normal, but it was just a much more pleasant time. I missed out on a lot of the benefits the first time I quit because I was so focused on just drinking again. So that's why this month So yesterday's new episode was about 7 ways to get started in dry July. But then for the rest of the month, I'm doing what to expect physically, and then another episode, what to expect emotionally, and what to expect cognitively when you first quit drinking. So I'll explain all those things in my podcast this month. But it was a big difference when I accepted that I needed support. I was open to the idea of sobriety, and I let go of the hope of moderating someday. I felt very at peace with my decision, even though it was very scary. And I wish I could have figured it out. It wasn't that I got sick of it and quit. I wish I could have figured it out, but it was just different. So if you're struggling, just open yourself up to the idea of getting support and trying something different. So that was a super long-winded answer to your question, but I hope that answered your question. I saw one in the comments, does your husband drink? Yeah, my husband is one of those freaking have half a beer and then leave it, and I'm looking at it like, how can you leave that behind? Like, what is wrong with you? He's one of those guys, but he is very considerate and accommodating with my sobriety and super supportive, but he does drink around me. And we spend a lot of time talking about what that looks like and how he can support me. So thank you for the question. Can you talk about alcohol and the effects that it has on medication for depression? Yes, 2 different effects. It will make your medication less effective. So if you're taking an antidepressant for your depression, it's not going to work as well because alcohol is also changing your brain chemistry. And alcohol, it takes over. It changes the way the brain functions. The body sees it as a poison. So it's really prioritizing alcohol. And you being depressed or not depressed is a lower priority. Also, drinking on medication is going to increase the likelihood that you will have negative side effects from your antidepressant. So it's not going to work as well, and you're going to have more side effects. And this could be the difference between having a positive experience with a medication and not having a positive experience. You might think oh, I can't take this medication. I tried it. I had so many bad side effects. It didn't work for me. But if you were blasting yourself with alcohol every day, you don't really know how that medication worked for you. A lot of people will stop drinking and they'll be able to decrease the dose of their antidepressant because it just is able to now work. That's not everybody's experience. Some people quit drinking and get on an antidepressant because now they can work on their depression, but alcohol and any medication really, but antidepressants, they're not your friend at all. That's why it says on the bottle, don't drink on this medication. And as someone who had depression or has, I never took antidepressants because I didn't want to drink less. Drinking was more of a priority for me than working on my depression. So I never even tried antidepressants because I knew you weren't supposed to drink on them. Also, some anti-anxiety medications, they change the way that alcohol interacts with your brain, and you can actually get drunk faster. You might see some people get drunk on half a drink and you're like, what's going on with that person? It might be because they're on medication. So it just changes the way that alcohol impacts you. It changes the way your medication impacts you. What is the name of your podcast? Sober Powered, just like my page. So if you search for Sober Powered in a podcasting app, you're going to see a picture of me holding a brain. And that's my podcast. I did not do AA. I was afraid that someone would recognize me. And that was a huge block. I was a teacher for 5 years before I switched careers into biotech, and I was afraid I might run into a former parent, and that really held me back. I didn't want them to be like, oh my God, you were drinking like a crazy person while you were teaching my kid? And I know they would be there for the same reason I was there, but that really held me back. I've done some virtual meetings, but therapy and online sober communities were the things that had the biggest impact. And yeah, the God religious aspect part of AA also held me back. You don't have to bring religion into it, but sometimes it's kind of hard when it's mentioned, so I get what you mean. I have a community that we have an app, and we have 3 meetings a week, and we have fun in there. So if you want to join us, the link is in my bio to do that, and you can try it out. But we just have regular chat meetings. We don't do AA or step work or anything like that. So I say give everything a shot. And if it sucks, you don't have to do it again, but give it a real shot. You never know. There's a lot of people that prejudge AA because of the general perception on them and the religious aspect, but then they finally try it and see it's like the thing that helps. And every meeting is different too. If you go to one meeting and you're like, these people are too religious for me, this isn't the right spot, another meeting's probably going to be completely different. So I would just encourage you to keep trying things. There's also Smart Recovery that has in-person meetings. So I hope that gives you some good ideas. How long did the anxiety last, and how long do withdrawals last? So next Friday's episode is what to expect physically when you quit drinking. So this is what I am going to talk about. But it's different for everybody, and it depends really on, like, did you start off with anxiety? Because if you already have anxiety and then you drink a bunch of alcohol, it's probably going to be harder for you in withdrawal. It also depends on how many years you drink. So there's a lot of factors. For the most part, withdrawal is like 1 to 2 weeks, but the anxiety can last for a while if you actually do have anxiety, because you have to learn how to deal with it. You have to learn how to cope with it. Sometimes quitting drinking can even reveal a mental health condition that was hidden by our drinking, because it can feel like alcohol's medication. We self-medicate with it. So you might actually have anxiety or depression be revealed for you. A lot of people have reached out to me with health anxiety, and they're like, is this because I quit drinking? Is like this what happens? No, that's not what happens. You probably had health anxiety the whole time, but you didn't care about it as much because you were just drinking all the time. So it depends. I can't really answer that. But if it's really bad, I would talk to your doctor. There's no shame in needing medication to get through the beginning. And I would talk to a therapist to learn how to deal with your anxiety without drinking or going to something else. And next Friday's episode is all about what to expect physically. So I'll be getting into that more. AA is a spiritual program, not religious. Shouldn't you clarify that? It's a spiritual program, not religious, clarifying it. But a lot of people see it as religious because there are a lot of religious people that go to AA. So I understand the original question and where she was coming from. Love the mini mic. Oh, thank you. I got a lot of DMs about it too. I'm a big fan of the mini mic. I think it's adorable, and it can come on the road with me too because it's so cute. So I might even bring it on vacation or something. So thank you guys for supporting the mini mic. Is it okay to attend an AA meeting during a tolerance break? I'm not 100% sure what you mean. Do you mean like you're taking a break but you intend to go back to drinking afterwards? I think if you have the desire to take a break, you are more than welcome in an AA meeting. I think that they would love to support you. You can also check a meeting out virtually if that's easier for you. There are tons of AA meetings that are virtual. There's an app. I think it's just called like meeting guide. If you go in your app store and you search like 12-step meeting or AA meeting, it's a blue background with a white folding chair on it, and that will show you like all the meetings in your area, virtual and in person. So you can find, or you can go on Google and search for it too. But I think you can definitely attend. I think people would welcome you. You don't have to have like perfect sobriety to attend meetings. You don't have to like feel that you're committed forever to attend meetings or join a community or something. Everybody is welcome. What are your thoughts on medication to help you stop drinking? I think they're cool. I did an episode 47 of my podcast, where I explained how all the different medications actually work. So if you're considering like trying one out or something, listen to that episode. That's 47. So antabuse, that one is actually going to mess with the way that you process alcohol. So the toxic intermediates build up in your body and make you feel sick. So that's why you can't drink on that one at all. Naltrexone is really cool. That messes with the opioid receptors in the brain. So the thought is that you can drink on it, but it's not rewarding or pleasurable. And it's also thought to maybe help with cravings. And then there's Camprol or acamprosate, and that can also help with cravings, and that can help you with that initial withdrawal period too, where your brain chemistry is like all weird and it just wants alcohol and it's trying to regulate. So if you're interested, I would say reach out to your doctor, have a conversation, give it a shot. There's no harm in trying it if your doctor thinks it's a good idea. But yeah, I think it's cool that we have so many different options. Just make sure if you take antabuse, you can't drink on that because you'll get really, really sick. So no drinking on antabuse. But I think that they can be very helpful. I know some people that quit for good after taking medication. I am in early sobriety, and someone told me to eat something sweet when I had cravings. Your thoughts? I would say no. Please don't do that. I would say don't try to replace alcohol with sugar. I wouldn't, because now you're going to build up a new problem in your head. When you have a craving, instead of reaching for sugar, find something that's actually going to help the craving. Like go on a walk, go to a meeting, check in with your sober community, call your sponsor, go to the gym and lift the heaviest thing you can find. But if every time you have a craving, you eat some sugar, now you have a new situation. So I would not do that. Sugar cravings are super normal in sobriety. I personally say, like, don't worry about like being sugar free or trying to control your sugar intake in the beginning. Just focus on not drinking because that's hard enough. But you might eventually get to the point where I'm at, where it's like sugar all the time, and now I have to do something about it. But in early sobriety, just focus on not drinking and be very mindful to not replace alcohol with something else bad. So I hope that helps. Any other questions, let me know. I'll stay on as long as you guys have questions. I'm going live twice a week for the whole month. If you didn't see the schedule, it's on my page on the Dry July post. The live schedule is there, so I'll be live again in a couple days. And then all of the lives will be posted if you missed them too and you want to watch them back. They'll be on my YouTube if that's easier, or they'll be here. And thank you guys so much for joining, and I hope you have a great Dry July. If you're looking for support, please listen to my podcast. I have new episodes every Friday to help you out. I also have a Dry July channel here on Instagram. If you go to my profile, you can join it and get some extra support. And I have a community with meetings 3 times a week and a private space to connect. There's a lot more questions, so hold on. Do cravings ever go away completely? Completely, like 100%? Probably not. Like 99%? Sure. In the beginning, you crave alcohol because your brain is used to running on alcohol. It has adapted the way that it runs to compensate for all the alcohol that you're drinking. So that's why when you quit drinking, you have withdrawal symptoms, because your brain thinks that it needs alcohol to function. So because it feels that way, it's sending you signals to drink in the form of cravings because it thinks it needs alcohol. After early withdrawal, you can have post-acute withdrawal. Lucky us, right? There's a second phase. I have a bunch of videos on my YouTube channel explaining pause or post-acute withdrawal if you want to learn more about that. But other cravings come from emotional triggers. So if you do not do the work in sobriety to understand why you are drinking and what sets you off, every time you have a trigger, you're going to want to drink because you know that alcohol makes whatever that feeling is go away. So that's why we have to learn how to deal with our anxiety or depression or social anxiety or whatever it is without alcohol. Otherwise, we're going to continue to be triggered and have cravings. So your body is craving the sugar that it lost from the alcohol. In the beginning, you should have a little bit of sugar. It helps the cravings. This is actually a myth. So if you listen to episode 41 of my podcast, I explain why we crave sugar in sobriety. And this is the most common myth that I saw online. So I addressed this one and then 2 other myths that I see in the sober community. There is not any alcohol in sugar. Alcohol is made up of ethanol, which has nothing to do with sugar. It's not converted into sugar in the body. It's converted into something called acetaldehyde and then acetate, and those also have nothing to do with sugar. We crave sugar for the dopamine hit because it can also be used to control our mood and make us have fun and de-stress. So it's not because alcohol has sugar. So if you want to learn more about why you want all the sugar, listen to episode 41. Do you feel that it's problematic to take benzos as needed if you had a drinking problem since they both work on GABA? Problematic? No. I would just be really mindful that those are very addictive. And they're really hard to come off of when you're addicted to them. So I think, I have asthma, I have a rescue inhaler in case my asthma is bad. If you see your medication as a rescue, if you're in a panic attack and you're really freaking struggling, then I think that that's great that you have that option, but I would just be really careful because that can sneak up on you so easily, and they're very highly addictive. So I would make sure that you're in therapy working on your anxiety. And unfortunately, doctors really give those out a lot, and they can cause addiction and mess with people. So I don't think it's problematic. You just have to be very, very careful with it because it's very addictive. Okay, 2 more. What are some of the biggest triggers during these holiday weekends? Seeing your family that you hate and that you can't stand, having to talk to them, and they're going to ask you about your job or when you're having kids or just get in your business. Family's a big trigger. Being around people that are drinking and watching them drink and feeling envious because you want to drink. Warm weather is a trigger because we feel like we should be drinking because it's so nice out. Another trigger, FOMO, feeling left out, wanting to do what everybody else is doing. If you have social anxiety and you're very uncomfortable at parties, that's another trigger. And I'm forgetting some, but there's a lot of triggers on holiday weekends, and the fact that we feel that we should drink. But just because you feel all of those things doesn't mean you have to drink. I think if you give it a chance and you get through a party or a holiday weekend or whatever it is without drinking, you're going to feel so powerful, and you're going to realize you don't need it. And that's a big part of sobriety, is proving to ourselves that we don't actually need alcohol. I was diagnosed with ADHD a few years after getting sober. Is this something you've come across? Yes, and I did a whole episode about it. It's in the 140s. I can't remember the exact episode, 143 maybe. But I have a whole episode on why this is so common. Because there's a ton of people that quit drinking and then get diagnosed with ADHD. So there's a lot that goes into it. I could do a whole big long lecture on it. But I already did on my podcast, so just go listen to that episode and you'll get all the info. Which podcast deals with your brain and why after one drink you can't stop? Episode 125, why you can't stop drinking once you start. I explain where the off switch goes. So that's 125. But I encourage you guys, scroll my catalog, because basically every question that people are looking for, I have answered it or something similar on my podcast. I have almost 160 episodes. I've been doing this for 3 years every single week. So there's a ton of info if you just scroll my catalog. And I think that is it. I'm going to get off. I'll see you in a few days, though. So check out the live schedule on my page. Make sure to join the Dry July channel. I do have all my episodes memorized. It's a special skill. Only the ones that come up a lot, but I do have most of them memorized. I hope you guys have a great July 1st. My community is there if you need support. If you want to talk trash or vent, you can do that in my community. We have a meeting on Monday and Wednesday. So I'll see you guys in a couple days. And remember, you got this, and you don't need stupid alcohol to do anything. It just sucks. And if you're looking for some happiness in your life, instead of having sugar, get yourself a tiny little microphone and start talking in it, and it will make you very happy. This was only $10, and it brings so much happiness to me and a lot of you, because I've had so many messages about the tiny mic. So I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for being here, and thank you so much for participating and asking questions.